Probably one of the requests that we get the most is to do tutorials on mobile games. And at the top of that list is touch controls. So we thought it was finally time. Here's how to control your game using touch input in Unity. But before we get started, this video is sponsored by Unity Pro. To all of you indie game developers out there, Unity Pro is the perfect match for freelancers or teams of 2 people or more. When going pro, you get access to Unity experts, like 3 expert training sessions per month, where you can get help and guidance on key dev topics. Along with that, the pro membership gives you a free game server along with each seat, priority access to a success advisor, and maybe most important, Unity Pro comes with Unity Teams Advanced, which allows your team to save, share, and sync Unity projects with each other. For me, Unity Teams just makes everything so much easier. So if you're a freelancer or a small team who wants to take your game development to the next level, I'd recommend you check out Unity Pro. Simply click the link in the description to get started. Also special thanks to Art Armin, Michael Neely, Andrew Kalinenko, True VR Systems, Alexander Blair, Sima.io, Cheetah 3D, and Infinity PPR for their support on Patreon. Now let's look at some touch controls. So the first thing that we need to do when working with mobile in general is switching our build target. To do this, we go File, Build Settings, and here we can see a list of all the different platforms available. I'm working with iOS, so I'm gonna press that and then hit Switch Platform. If you don't have the module installed already, there will be a button to download it and then install it. And once it's done, we are ready to pair up Unity with our phone, because it's just really nice to be able to test these things on the phone itself. Luckily, Unity has a cool app for this called Unity Remote. So to set this up, let's go ahead and grab our phone. Now I'm in the App Store here, and I'm going to go ahead and search for Unity Remote 5. I'm then going to download the app here, press Get, and wait for it to install. I'm going to press Install here. And when it's done, I'm going to go ahead and press Open to open up the app on my phone. And it will then prompt us to connect this device with a USB cable to our computer. I've gone ahead and prepared a USB cable here that we can use. I'm going to go and plug that in. And we can hear that it's now connected to my computer. The next step is to go into Unity and press Edit, Project Settings, Editor. And here we want to go to the right under Device and make sure that your device is selected. Now, this process might differ depending on the device that you're using. In my case, for example, I'm using Windows on my computer, and so I had to make sure that iTunes was installed. I really recommend you check the link in the description for a more detailed guide on setting this up. And now we're actually ready to test our game on the device. So if I go ahead and press play inside of Unity, we should see that the game is now being broadcast to our phone. Of course, our game is currently not very exciting. It's just a blank white screen, but I've gone ahead and prepared a small test for this. So in my scene here, you can see that I have a canvas. And if we enable this, we can see that under this canvas, there's a simple UI button. And as soon as I enable this in the editor, it shows up on my phone. And the reason why I've put a button here is just to show you that UI elements will work by default with touch. You don't have to do any extra code. So if we go ahead and press this button, you can see that it will pop up with a text element saying that it works. And that's because inside of Unity, I've simply added an event to our button that enables this text element. So if your game is only made up of UI, well then you actually don't need to do anything at all. However, we can of course also program other stuff in our game to work with touch. Here, for example, I have this crab sprite, and currently it has nothing more than a sprite renderer and some animation. Now, what if I wanted to be able to move this crab around by simply touching different places on the screen? Well, doing this is actually super easy. Let's go ahead and add a new component, and the component that we want to create is something like move by touch. Let's select new script and hit create an add. Let's double click it to open it up in Visual Studio. Now, whenever we're working with input, we want to use the update method. And we're actually not going to be using start at all, so let's just go ahead and remove it. Inside of our update method, we can then check for touch input. And the way that we do this is by using an if statement. And we want to check if input.touchCount. And this is a variable that will change depending on the number of touches currently on the screen. Because as I'm sure you're aware, the cool thing about a touchscreen is that you can have multiple inputs at once. After all, you do have 5 fingers. So what we want to check is if touch count is greater than 0. In other words, are there any touches at all? And if there is, well then we can go ahead and get information about each touch. We do this by using input.getTouch. And here we simply give it the index of the touch. So if you want to get the first touch, we write 0. Second one is 1. Third one is 2, and so on. I'm just going to get the first touch here. And we can actually store the information about this touch in a variable. So let's go ahead and create a touch variable. Let's just call it touch with an capital T and set it equal to whatever input we get. And now we can use this touch variable to get information about the touch. So if we write touch.position, we get the current position of the touch on the screen in pixel coordinates. We can also use touch.phase in order to get information about the current state of the touch. Did it just begin? Did it just end? Did it move? Was it stationary? Or did it get cancelled by the device? So if, for example, we wanted to just move our object to the current point of the touch, we would of course use touch.position. However, touch.position is in screen coordinates. It's measured in pixels. And the position of our object is in world coordinates. It's measured in units. So we have to convert from screen to world space. And this is done really easily by referencing our camera. So we can go camera.main to select our main camera. We then do .screen to world point. And this is going to take in a screen position, in our case touch.position, and convert it to a place in our world. We can then store this position in an ordinary vector 3, so 3 coordinates, x, y, and z, and we'll call this something like touch position. And now we can simply set transform.position, so the current position of our object, equal to our touch position. Also, this is going to set our touch position on the Z to the same position as our camera. And we don't want that. We just want the Z to remain at 0. So I'm just going to set touch position.z equal to 0. And that should fix it. So if we now save this and head into Unity and hit play, and I'm going to pick up my phone here. And now every time I press somewhere on the screen, the crab moves to this point. Awesome. But of course, if we're able to register multiple touches, wouldn't it be cool if we could show all of our touches on screen? And this is actually not that much harder to do. Inside of Unity here, instead of just getting the first touch, we can get all of the touches and then simply loop through them and do something for each touch. So let's just go ahead and remove our code here. And instead we'll write input.touches. And this is just an array, which means a list of all of our touches. And just like with any array, we can create a loop that goes over all the touches. So I'm going to go ahead and create a for loop here. This for loop is going to create a variable called I and set it equal to 0. And it's going to keep going until I reaches input.touchCount. And every time we go through the loop, I is going to be increased by 1. In other words, we're going to loop over each touch in our array. And we can of course get the position of each touch the same way that we did before by using camera.main.screen to world point. And the touch position is now input.touches. And then we're going to get the ith element. So whatever I is at this point in our loop, that is the touch that we want to get. So at first we're going to get the first touch, then the second, then the third. And for each one, we're going to get the position. So now we've converted the screen position of each touch into world position. And again, we can store this in a variable, just a regular vector 3. Let's call it touch position again. And just like before, we could go ahead and create a crab for each one and move them around. I'm just going to use a handy method called debug.drawLine. And this is going to draw a line from, let's just say, vector 3.0, so the center of our world, to our touch position. And I'm going to make the color of this line red so that we can easily see it. And now if we head into Unity and hit play, and we need to make sure in our game view here that we enable gizmos at the top to actually draw the lines. I'm then going to pick up my phone here. And now whenever I press somewhere on the screen, we can see that a red line gets drawn to my finger. And I can use as many fingers as I would like to. All of the lines are going to get drawn. Pretty cool. Now, of course, if we look at a real game example, we might need something like a joystick to move around our character. Here I'm just using the same scene as we used in the shooting video. There'll of course be a link to everything in the description. And currently this character is moved around just using the keys on the keyboard. Let's instead create a visual joystick that can be moved around by touch. And of course you can create joysticks from scratch using C#, but I think that's overly complicated for what we need to do here. Instead, I really recommend using this free joystick pack from the asset store, at least as a base. This comes with 3 types of joysticks and some placeholder sprites to use in your game. I'm just going to go ahead and hit import here and hit import again. And we should now see this virtual joystick pack folder in our project. It comes with a few example scenes and a guide, and most importantly, it comes with some really solid scripts and prefabs to use as a base. So I'm just going to go back to game view here, and I'm going to go ahead and create a UI canvas. Of course, we use a canvas for all UI elements, and a joystick is definitely a UI element. I'm then going to take a fixed joystick here and drag it under the canvas. And we can see everything is pretty much already set up. Feel free to modify any of these sprites and make them look how you want. And also feel free to open up the script here and change it if it doesn't do exactly what you need. And once we have this joystick in our scene, we can start using it in our player movement. So I'm going to select my player here. I'm going to open up the player movement script. And you can see if we scroll down here to our update method, we're currently moving horizontally by simply getting some input on the horizontal axis. And this works fine for the keyboard and for a controller, but we of course want to change this code so that it uses our joystick instead. And doing this is super simple. We simply need to go to the top here and create a reference to a joystick. So we'll create a public joystick and we'll just call it joystick. We then go down to our update method and replace this input line here with joystick.horizontal. And just like with input.getAxis, this is going to give us a float value that goes between -1 and 1. So if you press the joystick all the way to the right, it's going to be 1. All the way to the left, it's going to be -1. Right in the center, it's going to be 0, and anywhere in between. And in fact, if we just want to try this out right now, we could save this, go into Unity, and I'm just going to change the aspect ratio here to iPhone 5 wide, just to make sure our pixel art still looks okay. I'll then take the fixed joystick and drag it into our joystick slot. I'll also quickly disable the gizmos again. And now when we hit play, and of course pick up our phone again, we can already move our character using the joystick. Now, I think for this game, I don't actually want to be able to move a tiny bit to the sides. I want to either move at full speed or nothing, because I think it looks really silly when he's running quickly in his animation, but almost not moving at all. So in order to go ahead and change this in our script, we can of course just play around with our movement variable. So inside of Visual Studio, instead of just setting horizontal move equal to joystick.horizontal and then multiplying with our speed, let's go ahead and create a few if statements here. So in the case that joystick.horizontal is greater than or equal to some value, and I'm just going to set 0.2. So this means that we have to move the joystick at least 0.2 in order to move our character. You can play around with this. It's almost like the sensitivity of the joystick. Well, in this case, we want to move right, so we can go ahead and set horizontal move equal to our run speed. Now, in the case that this isn't met, so else if, we want to check if joystick.horizontal is less than or equal to -0.2, in which case we want to go ahead and move left. So here we'll set horizontal move equal to negative run speed, of course to move in the opposite direction. And if none of these requirements are met, so if it's not greater than 0.2 or less than -0.2, well then we just don't want to move at all. So we'll set horizontal move equal to 0. Whoops, forgot an else there. And now we should actually see this working just fine. So if we save that, go into Unity and play again, we can see that if I only move the joystick a tiny amount, nothing is happening. However, if I get past our threshold, we can see that our character snaps right to full speed. And I think when playing with this, it actually feels really nice. Of course, adjust your movement speed, adjust your sensitivity and all this stuff to suit your game, but I think this feels really nice for mine. Great. Now, we also want to be able to jump and crouch in this game, and we could of course create buttons for this, but I think it would be smoother if we just used the up and down part of the joystick to do this. So to implement this, we'll go into Visual Studio and we'll go under our horizontal movement and create a new variable. This is going to be a float. Let's call it vertical move, and we're going to set it equal to joystick.vertical. Then when we currently check if we want to jump here, we're checking if we get the button down jump. We can instead just check if vertical move is greater than or equal to some value. Again, this is the sensitivity of our jump. I want this to be much less sensitive than our movement because we don't want to be jumping on accident all the time. So I'm going to set it to something like 0.5. And now every time we move our joystick further than halfway up, we're going to trigger a jump. And we can do the exact same thing for crouching. Instead of getting some button input, we can check if vertical move is less than or equal to -0.5, in which case we want to crouch. And if it's not, well then we want to stop crouching. So we're simply going to put else here and get rid of this if statement entirely. And now if we save this code, go into Unity and play, and now by moving up our jump stick, we should be able to jump, and by moving it down, we should be able to crouch. And you can see how this allows us to fluently move around our level jumping and crouching in any way that we would like. And from here on, it's really up to you to implement more controls to configure your game. I would recommend trying to implement a shooting button yourself. You can of course either do this by using a UI button or by registering touch on a certain part of the screen. Everything can be done using the same methods shown in this video. So from here on, it's just about having fun with it. That's pretty much it for this video. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Also, make sure to check out Unity Pro. Just click the link in the description to get started. And in case you haven't seen it, we just did a video for the Brackeys Game Jam and the game that I made for it. It's something I'm super proud of, and the community made so many awesome games for the jam, so I definitely recommend you check it out if you haven't already. On that, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks to all of the awesome Patreon supporters who donated in August, and a special thanks to Alexander Blair, Simmer.io, Cheetah3D, Infinity PBR, True VR Systems, Cyborg Mummy, Derek Heemskirk, Faisal Malfi, Fang So Long, Leo Lassette, Clinton Van Skewer, Runen, Dennis Sullivan, Obrisi, Timma Folderbach, James P, Bruins Cat, Naoki Iwasaki, Gregory Pierce, Larry Tweed, Kirill Swiderski, James Rogers, Rob Farron, Robert Bund, Anthony Patton, and Erasmus. You guys rock!